And welcome once again to the Movies and Stuff Show. This is the Wednesday edition, right? It is Wednesday. Well, this is was last week Thursday, right? Last week was Thursday. So this is the Wednesday edition of the Movies and Stuff Show. Yeah, we used to be like clockwork, you know. I used to be able to like brag and say, yeah, Tuesdays 9 p.m. Eastern all the time. Now it's like Tuesdays 9:15, Wednesdays. Hey, Wednesdays 9 o'clock, right on the dot. Time's been better as the day. The days have been. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know what happened yesterday. I could have done the. I think I could have done the show yesterday, but I think what we agreed to is we wanted to watch the Andre the Giant. It did. I think so because the original intent was to do a double feature of the HBO things anyway. It was a Paterno and Andre the Giant, but it just turned out that Andre was premiering on Tuesday. So we're then gonna like push it to next week, and I don't know. Like I think it works better. Yeah. No, I agree. I honestly I don't think we could have done a whole thing on the Paterno show. I think it works out well that we get to talk about both, because they both different types of pop culture, really. Different types of culture. I don't know. There's you know, popular something, right? Um, yes, there you go. Yes, thank you. See, Marty, you know you're gonna have to carry the show. I'm I'm no, I'm running on about 3 hours of sleep, and I had a long day today, and but I'm here. I'm here for the yes. I don't know whoever's watching. It's cool. Someone will watch eventually. Hey, the pills episode's getting some hits. 1,000. Uh-oh. Erin's saying she can't hear you. I can hear you. Oh, Marty. Talk again? Yep. You are not there. Okay. Oh, we were having some problems. Okay. Uh, we'll be right back. No, I can hear you, Marty. It's something on my end. I have to reset. So, we'll be right back. Thank you for telling us. See, issues. Fun.
We would have done a whole show.
Hey, we are back from and Marty, your sound is back.
Okay,
they
thank
can hear you
God.
now.
I had some gems there that people missed out on.
You did. Oh, jeez. So hopefully people can see us again. We probably lost the connection briefly.
Oh, yeah, we're back up there.
We should be back up. All right. Thank you, Erin. Thank you for watching and letting us know.
If not for her, we would have done an entire show, probably.
Yeah. That would have been funny. Jeez. Anyway, we were talking about me being exhausted. You were talking about larger than life figures. We were talking about how we couldn't do a show for each one of these independently, so we merged them together. So it worked out for the better of everyone. That's a recap.
That's what you missed.
Did they miss it? Did they really miss it, Marty? Oh, we were talking about Pills. Pills is up to over 1,000 views, right?
Yeah, it broke 1,000.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
We have them every so often, like Pills. What was that Marilyn Manson movie? Did well. Thor.
Or randomly. I still think the Thor one's a glitch somehow because it went from it did all right when we first did it. Had a couple hundred, then all of a sudden we looked up, it had 1.4. I was like, all right.
I'll take it. I don't want to. I'll drink Pepsi because I'm tired. I'm much more of a Coke Zero sugar.
Zero sugar.
Zero sugar.
Now it's Pepsi Zero.
This is
right?
Pepsi Max Taste Zero sugar. This is Pepsi Zero Sugar too. What the fuck?
Yeah, I don't know why they felt the need to rebrand constantly.
Basically, I had an IV of Dunkin' Donuts coffee today.
There you go.
It was just hooked up right to my vein. Didn't do the trick. But anyway, so man, Paterno. You want to recap this one? Just what the gist of this is. I mean, people probably know.
Yeah, it was hard to tell. I don't think they based this off any one thing, and I think that was one of the major problems with the movie, at least for what I can see.
Yeah.
The movie, it's Al Pacino starring as Coach Paterno, of course, the infamous Penn State coach for what they say was 41 years. He was coaching Penn State,
something like that. Yeah.
And, it starts off in an odd way. It starts where he's getting a CAT scan of some kind, and then the movie is told as, I guess, flashbacks from that way, but it wasn't really even obvious what they were doing there. So yeah, it follows the whole Penn State scandal, of course, Jerry Sandusky, and how he didn't or did not respond, who could have done more. And the problem I had with it mostly was that it just lacked a clear narrative, I must say, because you would go, it was about, Coach Paterno's response. It was about a little bit about the woman who wrote the major story to begin with about this, the whole thing.
Right. She won a Pulitzer, right?
Yeah, won a Pulitzer. Sarah Gannon, played by Riley Keough, who was not a major actress.
She's been in some stuff that I saw.
She was in Magic Mike. I didn't recognize her.
Yeah,
she was in Magic Mike.
She was in a horror movie that I just watched recently with Aaron. I can't remember the name of it. But I ruined it for Erin. Not that she was too into the movie anyway. When I said, it's like, hey, she kind of looks like the girl from Twilight, because in certain angles, she looks like the girl from Twilight.
She was in Mad Max too. I don't know which one. She must have been one of the, non-speaking women. Because they had those three. There was the three women in that one that didn't really speak.
I haven't seen it.
That thing. You never saw Mad Max Fury Road?
I have it. I have a DVR.
Oh.
For like 2 years, I think I've had a DVR. I haven't had a chance to watch it. I can barely find time to watch shit for this show. How am I gonna watch a fucking 3-hour movie? I watched a fucking 3-hour movie. I watched Andre the Giant last night. The 1 a.m.
The West Coast version.
West Coast, yeah, the 1 a.m. version. While I was working, and okay. Well get into that. We'll get into Andre the Giant later. I'll tell the story about that. But yeah, I just I didn't think. I think Pacino had a really good performance.
Yeah,
and I think he's got a nice niche now in doing some of these like HBO type movies. I think this is his third he's done. Right, he did like Angel in America.
Angel in America. He did the. What's his name? The murderer.
Yeah. I can't think of his name either. Yeah.
Crazy hair, fucking.
I can't remember.
Doo-wop. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Phil Spector.
Phil Spector. Yeah. I know he's done this one.
And he asked before because he did. He was Jack Kevorkian as well.
Holy shit! Yeah, he's really kind of settled into this, and I think it's good for him. And I was talking about this the other day. That and we've mentioned this on the show before. Pacino's career versus De Niro's career. Pacino wins overall. Pacino has had the overall better career.
They both had odd third. I guess we can call this third acts at this point, but they've been very odd, up and down. Last 10 years.
No, but Pacino's way. Like you run through Pacino's filmography over the last 30 years versus De Niro's. Pacino has way more better stuff than De Niro. Way better. Like De Niro has very few elements in his.
Pacino has been a lot. I would say more. Hasn't taken on everything that De Niro.
Yeah.
De Niro just kind of did a lot of
shit.
Yeah. Which could, who knows? Maybe one of them has more money problems that the other one doesn't. But Pacino did that piece of garbage, Jack and Jill, which was just oof.
I mean, we can pull out some De Niro movies. He did Rocky and Bullwinkle.
And they both did Righteous Kill together, which was god awful. Oh my god.
And they're doing The Irishman, right?
Yeah,
They're both in The
that's been the
Irishman.
long.
That's gonna be a Netflix movie too, right? Netflix or Amazon, one of those two.
It's in post production. I know that they're gonna have to put it out somewhere because
They'll
they keep
put it out,
changing.
yeah. Well, they'll put it in the theater, but I think it's a Netflix or Amazon release or something like that.
He's playing Jimmy Hoffa in this one.
Oh, really?
That's a little odd.
Yeah. So yeah, I think some pretty good performances, but overall the movie falls flat. It makes makes me just hate Penn State.
And even at that point, I think Penn State gets a little bit of a bad rap, and not that it doesn't deserve it. It's well earned bad rap, but they focus too much on the crazies. I think one of the big scenes of the movie is when Al Pacino, when Pacino gets Paterno, gets fired, and all the crazy kids go run into the house, and it's almost like a riot-like state. But
and then Greg Grunfeld, or he's from he was on Heroes. He was the pilot on Lost. He
plays the smart son.
Yeah, and Scott.
Because he plays, and he's let himself go.
He has. We were saying that.
He put on like a good $2 bills.
Yeah, he's a big
dude.
Weird
about that guy.
But he comes out and they're like Scott Paterno, and it's just like
it's just. And again, there were plenty of other voices at Penn State that were saying, "All right, he's a piece of garbage. Let's get him out of here." Mm-hmm. But the loudest voices stay in the whole system. And I've been to Penn State since this since all went down. There's still plenty of Joe Passon, and there's still plenty of love for him.
Is his statue still up?
No, and that's the one issue I had with the movie. I had some issues with the movie, of course, but they focused on the statue, and they didn't touch on the fact that statue got taken down.
So it did, yeah.
They focused on his. The movie starts at a real Penn State game, focusing on when he won his 409th game, making a winner's coach all time. Then never mentions that those wins got stripped away. So it's just the amount of information they just kept out of this was odd to me.
Yeah.
No real epilogue as to what happened with the family.
Sure. I mean, well, the epilogue is Paterno dies.
Died. Yeah, that was a sad part too. Because once he got fired, it was just the whole point of the Paterno's life. Sorry.
The sad part because listen, Marty, if he would have died like 2 months earlier, he wouldn't have had to fucking like his legacy. He wouldn't have had to. He would have went out a happy man, right? Like the fact that all this shit happened. Made him realize how much of a piece of shit he was.
Well, the thing of it is, too, anyone who was a college football fan, even then or now, knows that Paterno was just there way too fucking long. He was 80-something years old, still coaching. And even in this one game, he was coaching from the booth because he broke his hip because someone hit him. Yeah. I mean, it was an insane, the fact he was still coaching just shows how powerful he was. And the point of this whole story is essentially how powerful Joe Paterno was in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, you see a lot of these coaches in these college schools. Sometimes they make more than the governor. They're the powerful person in the state. They don't really answer to anybody. They don't answer to ADs or the president. So that's why a lot of as they're going back telling the story of how this whole Sandusky thing got covered up, everyone was asked, well, what does Joe think? What does Joe say? What does Joe say? And they were just kind of, if he said okay or if he didn't do anything, it's like, all right, well, he's in charge, really. Mm-hmm. But again, the narrative of the movie just they focused a little bit on the president, the AD, but not enough that you even really knew what the issue was. Right. There were times when you'd go back to them like, all right, who is this person again? Because we hadn't, they showed him once.
Just sitting in his house.
Yeah, the president of the school, I think, or that might have been the AD. Yeah. Sure, just sitting in his house drinking, thinking back on things. And there are people, there was a Sandusky character, but he was just always kind of in the background of scenes.
But they made him look sleazy. They did a good job making him sleazy. That guy, he's probably spoke like 3 words, and he was sleazy.
The coach, the assistant coach that kind of broke the whole story, Mike McQuarrie, is there, but you never hear him. He never speaks either.
Yeah, never see him.
Which is just odd that, I don't know why they went the other way. There's no real, like I said, I'm not sure what the source material was for this. There are some public record, of course, of her, the woman's stories and what the school did, but a lot of it is stories from, interactions inside the Paterno household.
That we don't know any of that shit. I mean, because I'd say there's one powerful scene, and it's with Paterno's wife,
Yeah,
where
played by.
she says something along the lines of, "Well, of course you didn't know, because you wouldn't have let him in the pool with the boys."
But and even that, do we know she said that ever? Did
And
she ever
that's the
go on
point, and
record?
that's
Like,
my issue. That's right. Since we don't know who the source material is, it was the most powerful scene. It was the most powerful line in the movie. We don't fucking know if it's real. you know?
and even that kind of comes out of nowhere because throughout the movie, the whole, she's like, "Oh, why are we even talking about this? Everyone else should have done something." And that's the kind of hatred that the Paterno family has gotten that from people who hate them over the years have been like, well, they always tried to pass the buck. They never took any responsibility for any of it.
I mean, they should take some responsibility. They should take some responsibility, but to throw it all on them is ridiculous. This was a multi-tiered
It's multi-tier, but then
clusterfuck.
again, when you're Joe Paterno at Penn State, you are, you're essentially God of that area, and anything that happens, the reporter says it a few times. Anything that happens, to think that Joe Paterno didn't know about it, it's silly.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I agree. But do you think the president or whatever wants Paterno's like, hey, we got to get rid of your guy. We have to press charges and all this stuff. And do you think Paterno maliciously says, no, we're winning football games. I can't get rid of this guy? No, I think it was more just inaction on Paterno.
It was, well, they show in the movie a lot that just, the focus was always football. He didn't even
Sure,
bother.
yeah.
He didn't bother to read the report because he was getting ready for Nebraska.
Yeah, right.
And there was just kind of no realization that this was going to be a big story when it first starts in the movie. Like, oh, this, there's a press conference tomorrow. Just stick to football. Don't worry about this. It probably won't come up. There was no sense that this was going to become the national story that it did. And it was interesting hearing they use real clips from a lot of New York radio. Actually, if you hear in the background a lot of things, there was a famous clip of Craig Carton, who was on, now shamed himself now, on WFAN, who got into a screaming match with a Penn State alumni or maybe a Penn State student who called in trying to defend Joe Pa, and just screaming to her about how no, this is he's a monster for doing this. To hear the idea that you hear about a child, anybody doing anything wrong with a child, and your first response isn't to call a cop or talk to, and that was a cut coming up in the movie too, which was interesting. Was like, or what did Jerry say? Like, oh no, we never talked to him. What did the kid say? Oh, I guess someone talked to him. Then they realized no one ever talked to him. And it's just the whole thing is really just people passing the buck or just saying, and it's just it reminded me a lot of Spotlight. The anytime any kind of child molestation comes up, it reminds you of the Catholic Church, unfortunately. And it's just this idea that's like, oh, he's a good guy, it's just a weird thing. Just don't tell him to stop it. There was like 2 or 3 instances where it's like, all right, just tell him to stop it, or just tell him he can't bring him to the school. It's like, and it was never. I don't know. It's just this weird. You get into these weird situations where people are trying to protect the institution, and it's you can understand it to a degree, I suppose, because this is their whole world, and it's like, all right, do we want to just tear this all down? And it's human decisions, and people are assholes a lot of the time, and it's all very self-interest sometimes outweighs right and wrong.
Yeah, I get that. No, but I mean, with any, I know, and I know it's different when you go to the college, right? I mean, you're a Notre Dame fan, but you didn't go to Notre Dame, right? These Penn State people, they're there. They live there. This is their life, right? But fandom in general, and idol, creating idols out of these sports figures or celebrities and stuff like that. Have we gotten to a point though where it's we got to stop doing it, right? I mean, it sounds stupid, but we have to stop doing it because we're going to consistently let ourselves down. I just saw today on the news Kevin Spacey has even more charges being pushed against him now for sex abuse charges and stuff like that. The thing, it just you can't keep putting these guys and thinking that they're greatest, because when something like this happens, you start not you, but people start siding on the wrong side. right? Because they're so connected with Paterno, and they're vehemently have to protect their guy. They're not seeing the forest for the trees. At the end of the day, there are kids that got molested here, right? I mean, that's the story, and that was another. I'd say, one of the better scenes in the movie, right? Is when the reporter is saying, well, what do you think about Paterno? And he's like, why is that even a story? Fire the guy.
Yeah, that was
just get rid of him.
See, but he's coming from it from a child services point. That's the guy that worked child service. So that's his, of course. Like that was the inside Penn State as opposed to the outside Penn State reaction to it. Whereas like everyone's like outside, like, no, of course you got to fire Joe Paterno. It's not even a question.
And then
but at Penn State, it's like you don't fire Joe
Paterno.
He's fucking God. He's Joe Pa. And even he tried to get out of it. I remember most of the story when it happened because of course it wasn't long,
right? Yes,
everywhere. He tried to resign. He did resign. He said, "All right," but he's like, "Oh, I'm just going to finish out the year." And there was just inside the Paterno household. I think they tried. The son we talked about, the older one, and I guess
Scott
the daughter.
Jay. Oh, and then there's a daughter. Yeah.
Yeah, but even that, it's like you didn't even know if that was a daughter or that was someone's wife.
Yeah. Right.
And they were the ones who kept trying to be realistic about it. It's like, did you read this shit? Like, what the fuck happened here? It's like, what happened? Why didn't you do anything? And like, there was just such a constant focus on football that no one really cared. And it's just like, this is something that happened in the 80s. Whatever, it's fine. We're getting ready. It was like, yeah, we're getting ready for Nebraska. That's just, and that's not a, Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. Bill Belichick had one of his players was a fucking multiple murderer. And you asked him about it, he was like, oh, no, we're just focused on the Dolphins next week, And that's how these people operate. And that's why, that's why they're successful. I mean, God bless them. But it's also why they're fucking sociopaths, essentially.
They are. Yeah. What'd you think of how they ended it, right? I thought that was a good ending, honestly.
It was decent, but it reminded me a lot of Spotlight in the ending, too, because it ends with the reporter getting a phone call about, and again, although it's hard to know if that actually happened again, or is that there was a lot of things said about Paterno knowing things earlier than the initial reports, but again, we don't know if there was no corroboration really, so it's hard to tell. But she was getting a phone call at 1976. He knew something about 1976. Again, and I don't doubt it, but even in like you forget how old fucking Paterno was. He was 84 when this initially happened. So even in 76, he was in his 50s, 60s, and just you could tell, like even when they were reading the reports, like, oh no, why are we even talking about this? It's just a different, odd mindset of these people that just don't want to talk about anything other than football and just to think about. It's easier not to think about these things than to confront them, I suppose.
Yeah, it's still a piece of shit.
Well, and it's just. I remember feeling bad when it happened for him because it's an odd thing to even say, but it's like you look at him, he's an old man. You think of your own grandfather or something. You just like you want to think that the best of people.
I don't know. Yeah, I get that. In the last few years of my grandfather's life, I stopped really talking to him because I realized how much of a racist he was, and I couldn't, right? So I spent, he ended up passing away, and I hadn't talked to him for, a good 2-3 years prior to that. And so you start, it's tough, and this is family. So when I see something like this, and, this is horrible, what this guy let happen, man, this is going to sound shitty. I'm kind of glad that he didn't die 2 months earlier. Because I'm glad that he had to face this before he died.
This is the first obituary. It's the first. It's not the first sentence, maybe, but it's at the end of the first sentence. It's not the first word.
Let's see what Wikipedia says. I'm just gonna go with the description of Joe Paterno is.
The issue is then there's still people who would say, yeah, but he's still Joe Pa was the reason I got out of I remember I used to cover high school sports in the early 2000s, I would say, and I covered a kid from Bayonne who went to Penn State.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, Joe Paterno came into my living room, and he's, I went to college." So it's like he still had those moments. He still had all that history with people, so it was very hard for them just to say, "All right, fuck Joe." And it's like, not to defend the Penn State people, of course, but to give them some perspective. This all happened so quickly.
Oh yeah.
And so to think that they can just hear one thing one day and just say, "All right, fuck it, we're going to give up our whole way of life," because Penn State is its own. It's actually its own town.
Oh yeah, but a lot
It's
of these
not.
college towns are though, Marty.
Yeah.
Like I mean, we didn't go to a college. Right? I mean,
No.
we didn't go to
But
you didn't want to walk like a 3 block radius away from our school.
no.
I mean, um,
But yeah, I mean, these, Penn State, Michigan, whatever. These are ways of life.
they're
This is,
fiefdoms. They're these little like kingdoms. They are. It's like Washington D.C. It's a city or it's its own thing within a city, like within a state. It's its own thing. Duke is the same way, and UNC is the same way, and Florida State, and there's just certain of these is just like, geez,
and you see, like
Nebraska,
all
right?
these big schools, there are there are, not to this level, but there are equally as horrible things that happen as far as rape and.
Oh, I mean,
and it's always like there's always defense. There's people that just stick to their their colors. It's gang mentalities. It happens in politics now too. It happens in everything. It's like,
yeah, no, absolutely.
It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, Penn State people say, I'm not gonna agree with the Michigan person. Fuck you. I love Joe Paterno. It's like it gets to that level of stupidity, really.
I mean, hey, it's the same thing with the police force, and I love overall, like I love what the police force does for us, and I know quite a few cops who are great guys and great cops, and I still, you still can't hide the fact that there's some bad shit that happens there, right? You can't just say, well, blue protects blue. Once you start doing that, you undermine what it is to be a cop, right? When you start to say, I'm going to defend cops no matter what, even though they're doing this fucking horrible shit, then you start to undermine the principle of being a police officer. And that's where I kind of have issues with that. And that's this situation right here where it's just like, well, like I bleed Penn State, so I gotta protect Joe Paterno. It's like, no, you fucking you have to create a set of morals that relate to the society, the entire world around you, not this small little microcosm of what you think existence is, and I have a huge problem with that. And it makes me glad that I didn't go to a college like this, because would I be a dickhead like this? I'm a dickhead in many other ways, but would I be a dickhead like this? I don't know, right?
I mean, just I guess we'll finish up here and then go to the end. As a movie, we think we're both saying it's flawed. If you knew nothing of the story, I don't think you learn a few things. If you followed along, you're not getting anything you didn't know really. A lot of it was just kind of following along with the news of the day in the movie, so you're not getting any kind of really behind the scenes stuff at the school itself, or you get a little bit from the one kid who was one of the affected kids. You get a little bit from the reporter who had somewhat of an awkward performance. I don't know the woman in real life, so maybe she was like that, but it's just kind of an awkward interaction she had with other media members, and it's like stuff that just wasn't as important as the rest of the story, I don't think. And then, I mean, Pacino, he's great.
Pacino's good, and there's some other good performances. It's
the family members are all good, but again, it's nothing groundbreaking here. But it's it's on HBO if you have it on demand, or you have someone else's HBO Go account.
I can't even recommend to watch it. I thought
it was
okay, right? It was fine. It's nothing groundbreaking. I'm much more like I think. American Crime. I'm more interested. American Crime Story was a great season this year with the Andrew Cunanan stuff. The what was the other thing that the Waco we mentioned was really good, and I like those. This just, it didn't do it for me, right?
It's because there's a better movie in this story, no doubt.
There is a better movie.
Maybe it just needs more time to kind of that's the problem we're going to have with this generation of documentaries, or because
Or yeah.
we've already seen so much in the news every day that we know so much of it already. So you really need to find new, something new or some different kind of story to tell.
Yeah, maybe, or just time. You can't do it so soon. Like
Yeah,
we knew everything. Well, we thought we knew everything about Tanya Harding, and then we saw the movie, and I was like, oh, I forgot about that.
yeah. So
Or like because time had lapsed, that you start forgetting those details. Um, but anyway, yeah, it's on HBO, and we're gonna move on to our double feature here, where we're going to talk about the Andre the Giant documentary. This is with Bill Simmons. Bill Simmons was involved in this,
yeah,
right?
I think this
It's
was their
the
first.
30 for 30, because he's no longer involved with 30 for 30, or he's
Yeah, no,
still.
they took that from him.
Yeah, but I still think he gets some revenue or something from it, because I mean that's his property. I
It
think
is, but I
somehow.
think ESPN has put out a lot more since
Yeah,
he left too. So it's
yeah. But so it's from Bill Simmons, and we know that he's in tune with pop culture and all that shit. Wrestling. He's mentioned wrestling and
yeah,
a bunch of his stuff. So go from one underwhelming movie to what I feel is an underwhelming documentary. Um, and I mentioned to you today, it's like, yeah, overall it was good. It was fine, but I I felt like, and I'm not a huge wrestling fan, right? I was when I was a kid. Um,
yeah.
there was nothing I learned from this really. Like it all seemed like general knowledge that a casual wrestling fan would already know about Andre. It's like, oh, he was a big guy. Oh,
Yeah.
they moved him around a lot, kind of like a circus freak. Oh, he drank a lot and he had fun. Oh, towards the end of his career, he was kind of broken down and he had to, pass the baton on to Hulk Hogan. And it's like, there was nothing that jumped, like, I there was no new major uh, pieces of news that I got from this, right?
Yeah, I mean, even comparing it to other wrestling documentaries, which are usually great because wrestling lends itself to just, unfortunately, sad stories. I mean,
The cactus, well, not Cactus Jack, the Mick Foley one.
yeah, Beyond the Mat, which had him and it had all the Jake the
Oh
Snake stuff.
yeah.
It's fucking just depressing as all
Was
hell.
Scott Hall in that one too, or
Scott Hall's had a few different
is
things.
that a
He had
few?
a,
Yeah.
and then did you watch the one earlier this year, Ric Flair on
No, no,
ESPN?
no, no.
That
That
was
was a 30
really
for
good.
30, right?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was, and then Wrestling with Shadows of Bret Hart was a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot. I mean, it's wrestling lends itself. It's what it is. It's storytelling. It lends itself to good stories. And this one just didn't. And they promoted this one for like half a year, and it was a big documentary. Bill Simmons was doing it, and HBO Sports is always great as far as video packaging, and they do it all
It
well. But
looked very
just
slick. It looked like, but when you start peeling back the layers, it's like, what, they speak to like four people.
that was one of the issues too. They don't. The whole story is told from maybe two or three wrestling journalists, historian figures: Vince McMahon, Hulk Hogan, Gene
His
Okerlund.
best friend, right?
Yeah, the guy
Yeah.
Tim White, who was his best friend. I think he later became a referee, and a couple of the guys, thrown in. Billy Crystal, Rob Reiner talk about his movie thing.
Mm-hmm.
Robin Wright was there for a little while. Jerry Lawler for a little bit,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was a problem too. But I came to think about it. It's a sad state to talk about, but a lot of those other people are dead.
Big John Studd's dead, right?
Big
Like
John,
Big John
there was
Studd
a good,
is
there was
dead.
a
Like, because that would
Hogan
have been
told a funny, yeah,
that would have been
Hogan told a
great.
funny
Like if
story
he was
about,
alive. Yeah.
yeah, Hogan told a funny story about Giant not liking John Studd or Macho Man,
Yeah.
and
Right.
it would have been great to
Yeah.
hear, but like they're gone, and then they talk about how he went later. He teamed up with Bobby the Brain Heenan, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
and he's
He's
dead.
dead.
It's just, and of course, Andre's dead, so
Yeah.
you're not. The Ric Flair, the other documentaries we just talked about
Yeah.
were great
Yeah. And
because they're all,
Ric Flair had a little piece in this
yeah,
too, right? Yeah.
yeah, he was, but very little, just to
Mm-hmm.
mainly talking about his drinking because Ric Flair's a fucking drunk.
Yeah.
Again, yeah, so there's nothing, no real, there was more of a, half of it was a more documentary about, wrestling in the 70s and 80s about
Which
the different territories, which is
was
interesting,
cool.
but,
Yeah. Right. And I almost was more interested in learning, like,
yeah,
how, like I kind of know how the McMahon family kind of consolidated and how WCW kind of, and then see, that would be an interesting documentary series, right, is going from the splintered factions and the stars in those areas and talking to the people and the promoters and everything from there, and then how it did get consolidated and then bleed that right into the Monday Night Wars, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, I would kind of just leave it off of, I would just end it there because, you know, that was to me, like, that was the height of wrestling in general. Like, as popular as it was in the 80s, when WCW became a powerhouse, when Hogan jumped ship to go to the WCW, when the NWO was there, and honestly, WWE was on a downslide at that point too, but they still had the ratings. They still, you know, killed the market share. But then WCW just started taking over. I was like, wow, are they actually going to do it? Are they going to beat the McMahon family? The answer is no. But, you know, but I like that. I like seeing the different territories. And I like the idea that Vince McMahon Sr. And Andre really hit it off. And Vince would technically just loan him out because Andre, his persona and his wrestling abilities or lack thereof lent itself to traveling around and becoming a sideshow. It's like everyone wants to see this 7'4", 500-pound guy. You know,
that was interesting. I mean, there was definitely a happy slant to a lot of this story. I mean, there was about his, you know, how he got broken down at the end and stuff. That was all sad, but there was definitely putting a good shine on this. But there's an easy way to tell the story in that, you know, Vince went and stole him from all the territories and pimped him out, and then Vince Jr. kept him working way past his prime. You know, they talk about how at the end, you know, a lot of the focus is the big match of WrestleMania 3 with Hulk Hogan, which even if you weren't a wrestling fan now, you still probably, you know something about it. Because, you know, 91,000 Pontiac Silverdome and everything. But even at that point, they talk about how Andre can barely walk and he really couldn't do much. And
then he had a career for what, another 2 or 3 years after that?
Yeah, he didn't go away yet. So it's like, you clearly could have made the case, well, Vince, well, how come you're still putting him out there? You know, he needed help, you know. And that was a sad part of it, too, in that we think that he died because of all that's his condition, his giganticism, which we find out. We did find some things about his background that they found that out too late to really have fixed it. But it was still the idea that he just didn't take care of himself. And I think if he had been around today, or even, you know, in this kind of modern day of, you know, wrestling and how athletes take care of themselves in general better. I mean, today, you know, WWE today has, you know, wellness programs, and they, you know,
I guess
someone would have sat and said, hey,
Chris Benoit also went home and killed his family.
Well, that's another one that's going to be, whenever someone gets the rights to do that story, it's going to be fucking amazing. But clearly, you know, they talk about, again, he drank too much, of course, and he took probably pain medication. He didn't get surgeries he should have gotten. So it wasn't that he died, you know, of that. He could have prolonged his life. He could have gotten off the road and taken care of himself better. But
that should have been his last match, though. Like WrestleMania 3 should have been his last match. That should have been it. Like, and I think I can't remember. Was it afterwards? Yeah, it was afterwards that they had the whole. He does win the belt, right? And he gives it to $1 Million Man, and then they have to vacate the title, and then they have the tournament, and then that's the whole Macho Man, right?
Yeah.
I think ends up winning that, and then that leads into the Hogan Macho Man rivalry, and then that leads into the Ultimate Warrior. So I mean, it led into some interesting storylines, but it should have just been it. It's just Andre just loses the match, passes the torch on to Hogan. I want to touch something on what M. Vance says in the chat, because you know. The fascinating part about this documentary, I think, the most fascinating part, I don't know if I can believe it. And he's right.
Yeah, so much Hogan in it. There's a lot of Hogan.
So much Hogan, so much Vince. And it's hard to know what's kayfabe and what's not, right? Like, are they still doing these personas of, you know, even though they're peeling back the curtain of what wrestling is, how much can you fucking believe? Like, Hogan writes the fucking match out, and, you know, oh, we didn't know what Andre was gonna do.
That's the bullshit of it too.
It made it seem so fucking like dramatic, and I was like, that's bullshit.
And it's not that, I mean, the story of that match has been told 1,000 times already in every different thing we've seen. So, and I've never heard it told this way, where they went out there and Hogan didn't know what was going to happen. It's like,
I didn't write an ending.
Yeah, it's like, come on.
I didn't know what I was going to do, brother.
You know, and it's just, Hogan is doing a great job lately trying to rebuild his
His shattered.
his shattered image. And
He's-
it's a shame. I still love Hogan. I can't say anything.
I'm
But
trying to look around. I don't know if I see one. I might have a picture of me dressed as
yeah,
Hulk Hogan somewhere.
because
I'm trying to look.
he was
Yeah.
even highly featured in the Ric Flair documentary,
Oh really? Yeah.
and so complimentary to Ric Flair. Oh no, Ric Flair was the greatest. I'm not me. It's like all right,
Well,
well,
let's see if they do a Booker
Def,
T
yeah.
documentary and Hogan's as complimentary, or a Junkyard Dog one. You know what I'm saying here, right? You get what I'm going at with this one. You know.
Even in this one too. Oh, Andre was, I bowed at Andre's feet, and I'm sure some of it's true, but he definitely put a nice bow on a lot of this stuff to try and make himself seem like Hogan's whole career is based on Hogan's the man and no one can touch him.
Yeah.
And now he's all deferring to
Humble.
no,
He's
don't
being all
humble that.
humble
And
to Andre.
I mean, I understand because the guy's been broken basically, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's hard to believe
Yeah,
everything he said.
they don't bring him around at all, right? Like he's just been
No, they've started to get
blackballed.
they've gotten a little better lately, as where for a while they wouldn't even show footage of him or mention him, and now that it's hard, it's hard to talk about wrestling history without Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. I mean, he represents and like he had you talk about like 3 arc structure, right, to a story, and he kind of had like that 3 arc career, right? Like he had that whole rise in the '80s. He had the second part of his career with the NWO, and then he had his post career where he had that pretty good rivalry with The Rock.
yeah, he came back and was good again, and then even had a successful reality show career for a little while.
Yep.
That Hogan knows best or whatever, and then it turned out it was his downfall. Really,
very creepy with his daughter though.
He's got some Trump to him, yeah,
So,
in that regard. But that really was kind of what. Then we learned too much, I think, about him, and then the divorce happens, and he loses half his money there, so he has to go back and wrestle for a little while, and
the Gawker shit,
and the sex tapes, and the fucking, not even then the sex tape was 1 year, then like a year later we find out he was saying the N-word on a sex tape. It's like, oh, Jesus, there's only so much we can take here, bro. But again, like we said, he was a big part of the documentary, which was not surprising because their careers are so linked, I suppose, but. There was no other real stories from anybody else that we could, because like I said, a lot of them are gone. There was no. You could have had a whole new thing about how the younger, bring on some current wrestlers, they were inspired by them. Or
why didn't they have?
The Big Show could have been on there.
Yeah, right. I mean,
because it just ends really, and it's like they talk about how he died, and it's like, all right, there was no like kind of legacy to it.
Yeah, right, and even like a rundown of the because there's. I mean, think about this: El Gigante, Undertaker, Kamala.
So much big man that came after.
Exactly, and they all even nowadays. There's a couple. Is it Rusev? Right,
Rusev's a guy named Braun Strowman, who's essentially just a big giant guy who comes out here and throws people.
And he's the one that like tag teamed up with a kid, right? In this last WrestleMania to win the tag titles. Yeah,
which is something that they would have done with Andre back in the day, where Andre can just go beat 3 guys by himself.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of what they had to do, right? Was figure out ways that they can make matches interesting with Andre, and they I would rather see like 4. Little people standing on top of each other fighting Andre, wearing a trench coat, so you just think it's one person.
That was the thing too. I mean, you had to touch on how big he was, of course, but there were so many like, oh, look at him, look how the beer can fits just in his hand. Look at his hand next to Gene Okerlund's face. That just kind of kept going on and on.
Yeah, it was way too many, and it was good to see Okerlund. I forgot that he's still around because I loved Gene Okerlund. Like he was so good at what he did. Like he was so good at what he did. He played that that because he was a smart dude and he came off as very intellectual, but he also had that goofy side of him, and it was great. Yeah.
They could have done a little more with the acting probably, and they had Rob Reiner and Bill Crystal and. I gotta imagine those guys watch it back because, like, oh, that's all you use. I mean, they were in there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And the family stuff was interesting. It was interesting to see kind of how he came from normal sized people.
It was cool. His brother, his brothers, and then talking about like he gets to a certain age and then now he's a giant. Yeah.
But and then they touch on that he had a daughter, but it's a 2-minute. It's a 2-second sentence. Really, this is his daughter that he had. He didn't have a relationship with her. It's like, okay. Yeah. I mean, and then they throw it at the end. Oh, his estate was left to the daughter. It's like, oh, so that's why. I mean,
that's why you brought it up. Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks for bringing that up. He wasn't an asshole after all.
Yeah, there was. I mean, again, they wanted to paint a positive picture, which there's no reason to downgrade the man after he died. But you could have talked about how he wasn't a good father. Clearly, he probably was a womanizer. They talked that a little bit. He didn't take care of himself.
They alluded to it, right? It's like, oh, Andre with the women, and they make it seem endearing. It's like, oh, Andre with his women.
That was the thing with the Ric Flair documentary too, which was interesting how they filmed it before he went into the hospital with his,
almost died.
Almost died, really, from all his drinking. And they just celebrated the fact constantly that he would drink. Oh, he would talk about how he woke up at 8 and drank the whole day. And
hey, man, Learjets and limousines.
How he was, cheated on his wife a week after they got married. And it's just like, he spun it, they let him just say it, and you could go with it whatever you want. But it was like, he was a shitty father. It was, and it's, that's not a lot of these athletes, especially back then, wrestlers were on the road 300 days out of the year, and did drugs and drank because they didn't have health. Still don't have health insurance really. They were, on buses and trains, and that's just what they did. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's a shame that that's like, as we mentioned, there were so many people that we would have liked to hear stories from that are dead because of drug overdoses or just horrible things they did to their body, and that's why wrestling documentaries are usually great, but this one, I think, because it was also done in conjunction with WWE,
and that's the point. So,
they were not, so they're not going to let. No. Which, I mean, I guess you have to go to them because they own all the footage.
But it's the same thing as like with I see a lot of parallels with professional wrestling and national football, right?
Yeah,
a lot of parallels. The same thing, like even wrestling today, there's very few people that make a ton of money from wrestling. It's the very few select. But if you just roll back to like the 70s or 80s, where these guys are literally killing themselves, and they're making pennies for the most part, and that's the NFL, right? Like I listen to I guess it's Golick and Wingo now. Mike and Mike, right? And you hear Mike Golick and talking about the strike where it's like he's fighting for like $400 extra. That's what they were trying to strike for back in the 80s.
And at that point they were playing on essentially what is concrete. I mean, they called it AstroTurf, but it was fucking concrete.
And there was no rules about hitting and leading with your helmet and like you were trying to break your opponent. And they made pennies, right?
And that's why we talk about the movie The Wrestler a little bit here.
Yeah, great movie.
That was that's real. That's that's not. That was people thought that was about Ric Flair essentially when they did it, and it's these guys are now, a lot of them are just doing it's a little better now because it's been a little more commercialized and WWE's become such a big industry.
And to their credit, they've protected their people some, right? I mean, there's who's it just returned? Was it Daniel Bryan? He missed like was it 3 years of action?
For 3 years, because of head injuries and neck injuries.
And back in the 80s, one of your biggest stars gets that. Yeah, even fucking Stone Cold Steve Austin, they rushed back after he almost got paralyzed. They rushed him back way too soon. He was never the same after that. He was still a big star because he had to be. Right, and Daniel Bryan was what, one of the top 5 at the time. I mean, because Cena was pretty much 3 years ago. Cena was already kind of out of the picture. Rock, he just shows up every so often. So Daniel Bryan was a big star, and it's funny. I don't even watch wrestling. I just know so much about it still. Because I'm on ESPN all the time and I see stories about wrestling, so I just read up on it. Like I don't actually watch any wrestling shows.
They've tried really hard to become a mainstream thing. But it's odd because it's a lot more now, but it's the viewers are nowhere near what we were talking about in the 90s or early 2000s.
Yeah, have you been a wrestling fan since like the 80s, like when you were a kid, or did you get into it later?
I would say like mid 90s on. It's like I was barely a fan, like even in the early Hogan days, oddly enough.
Okay.
So I barely knew Giant.
Gotcha. So you
Yeah.
didn't have like the wrestling magazines that they were referring to and all that stuff because Calia did. Like I remember
Yeah.
like we would go through wrestling magazines and we'd read statistics. We had like the wrestling almanacs. Like this guy's won the title like 5 times. You know, like it
Well,
was.
that was the thing too. It was like it was those It was like a carny atmosphere, I guess. Not atmosphere, but carny. You know, they would go to town. There was no. Sometimes you get tapes of different events, but there was no TV deals. And
Yeah.
now wrestling's on every fucking day. You can watch wrestling from
Yeah,
Japan.
Pro Japan is a huge
Yeah.
fucking thing. Like,
And,
I know I don't know if you know him, but Ron McRae,
mhm.
you might kind of know him or whatever. He goes out to Japan, every so often to do these big Pro Japan, and now did the guy win the title? The Shinsuke, whatever.
No, he
He
lost, but he
lost.
was
Okay.
he was a big main eventer.
Yeah.
Main event of WrestleMania.
Yeah. Right.
Like
And
it's become it's an oddly more popular than it's ever been it's making more money than it ever has before, but
mm,
without being as popular somehow. They've figured out a
it's
way to
weird.
do it.
Yeah, I mean, because with Cena not in the picture, they're missing a
Mhm.
star, right?
Yeah.
And they're trying to push Roman Reigns, and well, now that kind of fizzled, right? Because of he lost to
Brock
Lesnar,
Lesnar,
right?
who's a real fighter slash wrestler.
Yeah,
It's
he's not going to be a star. Like they have no
hasn't been a big
big
star of
star
the
power.
caliber of Andre and Hogan, and Cena is
Yeah,
he's becoming a bit of a movie star
yeah.
now, but he was still never on that kind of Hogan or Rock level as a wrestler.
Mm-mm.
So it's been a while since we've
There's The Rock, right? I'd say The Rock was the last one, and
yeah,
before
Rock was
it
the
was
last one.
Rock, Stone Cold.
I mean, back in Andre's day, you didn't have to be a wrestling fan to know who Andre the Giant was. Hulk Hogan was. Ric Flair was
Ric
famous,
Flair's
was a
big.
famous wrestler,
Yep.
but Hulk Hogan was just famous.
He was just
Uh,
no,
yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, I mean, it went Andre, Hogan, Flair was known. It's a like Bret Hart
yeah,
was a big superstar for a while, and I guess the counterpart in WCW was Sting. Like a lot of people
yeah.
knew Sting, um, uh, i- in that role, and then
In
it
the
really led
'90s and
into
everything became
Austin,
Stone
Stone Cold
Cold and Rock.
Steve Austin to The Rock, and then ever since The Rock, there hasn't been this
Yeah,
huge kind of star, and I think the WWF is lacking star power, right? I mean, the fact that you're bringing in Ronda Rousey, and
yeah.
the fact that fucking Shane McMahon still wrestles,
And he was in this thing too for like a minute and a half, like for no
yeah,
real
yeah.
reason. It was just odd. And I wonder if they did a lot. If they,
Aaron, where were you in 1999, 1998 when the Undertaker threw Mankind up the Hell in a Cell?
yeah, Undertaker too. I mean, again, like I would have
Yeah.
liked to seen Undertaker on this thing
Mhm.
talking about how how the Giant kind of he had to influence him somehow.
Yeah, I mean, you get some parallels right now. Fucking
Which
dragging
is
out the
there was
Undertaker's
yeah.
corpse to this fucking WrestleMania. Dude could barely move.
At least he's not. I don't think he's doing it for money, but I don't think he needs it as much
Um,
as maybe Andre did back then.
no, I think
Uh,
he's doing it more for the WWE.
yeah,
Like I don't think like I think he realized, man.
like yeah, they call. I was like, all right, I'll come. But the Andre the Giant thing is clearly is like, all right, we need you. We can't sell this thing out without you. But it's like, and it's sad. Like, what else was he gonna do, really? This is who he was. He was the they mentioned a few times how you couldn't go anywhere without someone pointing
Mhm.
and imagine him today and this is with someone will be taking his fucking cell phone picture every 5 minutes where he
Yeah.
walked.
Jeez.
They mentioned they talked about his life in North Carolina a little bit,
Mhm.
but with some of the people he lived there, but it didn't seem like he was living lavishly. He had some kind of a farm of some kind. His family back in Paris are still alive, seem to live fairly modestly.
Mm.
So it's not like he left some.
No, that's what I'm saying. Money in the like Hogan made the money.
Yeah,
Right. Hogan was
but
the
he
only
probably
one.
didn't make most. He made a lot of it probably because of the commercials and
The
the
movies and
movies. And
everything. Yep.
probably didn't make serious money wrestling wise until the
No,
late
no.
'90s.
It was the commercialization, and then he owned, right? Hogan owned the persona and the copyright to Hulk Hogan,
Yeah.
and that was the bigger thing, right? So he could like even Hulkamania and all that stuff. Like McMahon had to split profit with Hogan.
He tells a funny story. I don't know. It's hard to tell with Hogan because
Yeah, if
just
it's
bullshits
real
a
or
lot.
not. Yeah.
He claims he was offered the Foreman grill,
Yes.
and that great story where he turned it down for some kind of Hulk Hogan pasta maker,
Oh yeah.
and that made no money.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, who knows if that's true? But yeah, I've heard that story.
I mean, there's 1,000 Hogan stories that you could say. He said he was almost a drummer for not a drummer. He's almost a bassist for Metallica after Kurt died. Not Kurt. Who was the guy who died in Metallica?
I was gonna kick my ass. Clint.
Clint. Yeah.
What the hell's his name? Jeez, Aaron's gonna kill me. Should I mention in the chat, Aaron? Please remind me.
Oh yeah, he claims he auditioned
Cliff,
at a show.
right,
Cliff. There you go. Yeah,
Cliff.
he fell out of the bus or some crazy fucking story. So there's 1,000 whole. That's why when it's hard when he's
Cliff Burton. Is it Cliff
Cliff
Burton?
Burton. There you go. Very good. Okay. You're on 3 hours sleep, but I'll give you that. So when Hogan is 25% of your storytelling in a documentary, it's not great. But again, I wish they would have done more with the present guys and maybe talk about his legacy a little more than they did.
I agree.
It was only an hour and a half. I could have watched in a half hour more if they,
I don't know if I could have.
I don't know, but you could have. But
what I was gonna say is I actually watched it in 2 parts. I turned on the tail end of it because it premiered at 10, and so I guess around like 11, I watched the last half hour of it, and then I caught the 1 a.m. Re-airing of it. So I watched the beginning.
You were commuting today. You should have just watched it on the bus.
I was thinking about that. Yeah, no, I watched it. I watched it the whole thing. It's just in pieces last night. My commute was actually not too bad.
Because you got the data. You're good to go.
I know. Yeah, I did. Yeah, that's right. I just need a new phone though because I got one of those old iPhones.
You have the crack.
Well, not just the crack. I got one of those old iPhones where they just start like killing the battery, like they have the operating system like drain the battery.
It's lovely how that somehow always happens after 2 years.
So okay, yeah, there you go. Paterno Andre the Giant. Those are our 2 reviews for this week. We got like 4 minutes left. Is there anything else in entertainment wise that we want to cover? Let's say Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey, Han Solo. I actually got excited when I saw the Han Solo trailer. It doesn't look awful. I'm gonna go in half expecting it to be good. That's all I'm gonna give her. Right now.
Half expecting it to be good.
And we got the Infinity Wars coming out in 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks.
We gotta figure out what we're gonna talk about next week now.
Yeah, we gotta find a on-demand movie or something because nothing's coming out.
We have a Netflix movie in 2 weeks, right? We're gonna talk about one. So maybe we'll try to find like a like an actual VOD or maybe do retro. I don't know. We'll figure something out for next week. I want to try to have Talia on next week, so whatever it is, because she missed this week. She said that she was on a movie set yesterday, so hopefully everything's picking up for her. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Get some news on that.
Yeah. I was actually if we were going to do this next week, I probably would have had Jamil on because I'm sure he would have had some hot takes.
Yeah, I'm sure. Jamil's a big-time wrestling fan as well.
Yep. So.
And I mean, this is good for you don't have to be a wrestling fan to enjoy this story.
No, I don't think so. I was talking
on
about
the flip side too. If you are a wrestling fan, you might know all this stuff too already, like we said.
Yeah.
So. Look at this. The Knicks are now beating the Cavaliers right now.
Who cares?
And well, if the Knicks win, the Cavs drop down to the 4th seed.
Oh, it's guaranteed that the 4th seed. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. What's the score in the Mets game?
Let's see. Mets won 4-1.
4-1. Oh, because they had an earlier game, right?
10-1.
Jeez.
I love it. I love when the Mets are great early on.
Well, the last time they kind of went on that run was 2015, and they kind of were able to coast that for a while when they sucked during the summer before they brought Cespedes in, and then they made that World Series push. Because they had that really hot start. That's when like all the pitchers, like Harvey was clicking, and Syndergaard and DeGrom were all just like, they looked young. It's 3 years ago they looked young.
Now Harvey's fat with a bad arm.
Harvey looks terrible. Yeah, he's remember when he was going to be like the Yankees' next great pitcher?
Oh yeah, they were scouting. He still might be.
Not next great pitcher, but hey, listen, I gotta commend CC Sabathia. Like, he was fat and out of shape when the Yankees brought him in. And he has stayed fat and out of shape the whole time. And he's put himself a good career. Yeah, honestly, he's still holding up. he's not dominant like he, you know.
No,
But
he'll give you 5.
which remind me, the Mets bring in these random like just kind of old kind of worn out players, and they end up being like
Bartolo.
Bartolo Colon. This year, like Alex, not Alex Gonzalez,
Adrian.
Adrian
Yeah.
Gonzalez. So I was gonna say Alex Andre. I'm looking at the Andre the Giant poster. Adrian Gonzalez. Yeah, so you never know. All right, cool. We'll figure out something for next week. Wrap up another episode of the Movies and Stuff Show. I'm gonna go pass out. Please follow us at Movies and Stuff Show on Facebook and on Twitter. And HBO. They gave it a shot here. I don't think they hit a home run on either of them though.
No.
So, all right. Later.
Night, everybody.